our Lunch and Learn. There's a few of you that I've probably chatted with previously, but my name is Pam Gertson, and I'm the Executive Director of SRIA, which stands for the Smart, Sustainable, Resilient Infrastructure Association. So I just want to start off as an important act of reconciliation and gratitude to take a moment to acknowledge that SRIA operates across Alberta, which is comprised of Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 territory, the traditional homeland of Métis and Inuit, and ancestral territory of many First Nations, including the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived on and ultimately cared for these lands since time immemorial. So as I mentioned, my name is Pamela Gertson. I'm the Executive Director for the Smart, Sustainable, Resilient Infrastructure Association. We try to make that a lot easier and just call it SRIA, which maybe is not that much easier. We're a not-for-profit organization that is taking a collaborative and industry-led approach to reducing carbon in the built environment, ultimately by accelerating the adoption of innovative low-carbon solutions, which is what all of you provide for us. So we are currently funding 17 demonstration projects across Alberta and actively sharing or really in the stage of actively sharing the results of those projects as they all come to a close. We also have been offering the Business Growth Program for, I suppose, at least a year now, maybe a little bit longer than that, and have been running through it in a few different iterations, but have been working with Scott Penner to be able to deliver that on our behalf. So the idea of this is, we're trying to promote the adoption of innovation through the demonstration projects, but recognize there's also a need to support the companies who are developing those innovations and ensure that they're prepared and ready to meet the demand that we hopefully will drive for those technologies and products. Maybe with that, I just saw Hasnan had disappeared for a second, but I'll leave it at that. And I can introduce Hasnan, who's our Manager of Innovation and Business Services. I don't know if you have any additional introduction or if you're going to just pass it off to Scott, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Pam, and I really appreciate that. And sorry for all of the hustle bustle that is going on at the moment. There's a startup week happening, and I'm involved in that too. So just running between programs. I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time out to come and learn more about our business growth program. And I'm really excited for what Scott is going to be sharing with all of you today. So please feel free to ask questions anytime. Just to give you a bit of an update, we basically have about um, 4 to 5 spots that are left for our business growth program until the end of this period of its offering. And so if you're interested in it, please let me know at any time. Let Scott know, and we can kind of discuss more. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone for your time, and I'm just going to turn it over to Scott here.
Okay, thanks for that. Now, this is our probably third cohort for the business growth program. So we have been adjusting it as we go along, just trying to incorporate different things in it, and I'll highlight some of the changes as we go through. So this is sort of gets designed to wrap up sort of before Christmas or towards the end of the year. What we've kind of looked at is having a number of different, or a staggered start, because basically we don't want too many companies all at once. The idea is to be able to focus on 1 or 2 companies, or having 2 companies within sort of these starting blocks or groups. So we do have a couple of companies that are underway with the program, but there still are some open spots. Even be able to start as late as sort of mid to late November. The idea of this would be to last, or it would last 5 to 8 weeks. Typically there are 5 sessions, and they're sort of staggered out within a weekly or bi-weekly schedule. Okay, so little bit more about, I guess, my background and then the program itself. My background is engineering. I did engineering physics at UBC before going to the University of Arizona for a PhD in semiconductor lasers. I have spent a lot of time in school, but I've also spent a lot of time in the real world. So my industrial experience is around process and product development, primarily, or starting at Honeywell in Dallas, Texas. And that was an interesting experience. I joined Honeywell in 1999. It was around the time Allied Signal and Honeywell went through a merger. So Allied Signal sort of brought in the Six Sigma piece. They were one of the early adopters of Six Sigma as a improvement methodology, and Honeywell and Allied Signal, the combined company, really embraced that. So I was first did a green belt at Honeywell and have subsequently gone through different levels of training, incorporated lean into the mix as well, and see that there's a good synergy between the two. And in fact, Honeywell has embraced, as a lot of companies have, lean and Six Sigma as an improvement methodology. Honeywell, we were a rather small division within Honeywell, the laser division, but it was nice to have that sort of big company support, but still sort of acting as a smaller company. And some of the other companies that I've worked with in sort of a semiconductor or micro electromechanical systems companies were certainly much smaller. After time spent actually in clean rooms and that, I moved over to more of, I guess, a teaching and consulting role, Productivity Alberta and Go Productivity, and also at NATE. So being able to go throughout the province and work with different companies on understanding their processes, working with them on what is sort of operational efficiency or productivity improvement, or applying these lean principles to improve the business. So the business growth program sort of builds on that, or that's one of the core ideas here: business growth driven by productivity, innovation, operational efficiencies. I've also spent time with statistics and data, but that's more at sort of a green belt or black belt level, not the primary focus of what we're looking at within the business growth program. So the business growth program is really about understanding where the business is at and the objectives to move forward into the future or future state. So it's structured as 5 sessions. The first 2 sessions are half-day sessions, and it's really an assessment or understanding of the current state of operations, both through discussion, observation, a online survey or self-assessment, the baseline tool here, and just again understanding what the company, where it's at, what are the objectives, providing some foundations and fundamental pieces around what do we really mean by growth and productivity. And we'll expand on that a little bit later in these slides. Session 2 is looking at or building on the baseline results, looking at again what the strengths and weaknesses, the differences of opinion or perception among different people within the organization, and looking at moving towards that future state. So those first 2 sessions are perhaps more well-defined. The subsequent 3, 4, 5 is, you noted, a lot more flexibility and tailored to what the company is interested in, or areas of strengths and weaknesses. Actually, one more point about session 2, it's also including a site assessment. So if that makes sense, if you have physical operations, actually doing a site visit to observe and comment and provide more information about the current state. So then subsequent to those first 2 sessions, we sort of switched to sort of a 2-hour session for those remaining 3, 4, and 5, and having that flexibility to, again, focus on what's of interest to the company. So with some previous companies in previous cohorts. It's been around focusing on process mapping and process understanding, digging into the opportunities that way. Talk around standardization, whether it's standard processes, standard operating procedures, the use of metrics or data if they exist to again further understand the business, and really driving towards improvement opportunities. So what sometimes brainstorming or using a map as a focal point to identify potential improvements, and then how do we go about categorizing, prioritizing, and initiating the implementation of the best fit improvement ideas and some structure around that. The program, the business growth program, is really about defining growth, defining where you want to go as a company. Within the organization, we're going to be talking about growth, talking about productivity. So it does provide that commonality or common language, common understanding about what is productivity improvement, what is growth, how do we create that plan to move forward, and then also understanding that strengths and weaknesses or gaps within the organization. Session 1, which is that foundational piece, does provide or sort of set us up for the remaining sessions, so that definition of productivity and growth and understanding, providing a little bit of background in terms of that online assessment that's going to be provided, so that you're prepared for it, such that the answers are meaningful. And we'll talk a little bit later about what the baseline is all about. And then this is primarily done through the online format, typically using Teams, but also incorporating session 2, which and it doesn't necessarily need to be session 2, but does make sense in the earlier assessment piece to get that site visit to really understand the operations and have the face-to-face discussions. In terms of arranging or scheduling things, what a 5-week program would look like, and this is sort of an arbitrary start date and probably one of the late November starting, so this would be one of the last sessions that we potentially be looking at. So the first 2 foundational pieces, doing the baseline assessment, analyzing it, and then continuing on with that. If we were to start earlier, we wouldn't necessarily need to follow the weekly scheduling. Okay. So in terms of what that first session is all about, again, really definitions or foundational pieces, looking at productivity. This is where I'll focus our overview around what are the drivers of productivity, and I'll just jump right into that because it does. The baseline assessment also looks at these 6 factors. So recognizing operations and operational efficiency is a key part of productivity, as is innovation. So a lot of this is fairly broad in terms of, these are fairly big topics, and we're looking at it at a fairly high level view. What are the key ideas or key concepts, or how does it interrelate with productivity improvement? And that's what session 1 is really doing, looking at high level view. Within any one of these 6, or maybe a combination of them, we might dig in greater detail, and in sessions 3 or 4, what have you, dig down in, again, more detail. So the baseline assessment uses that framework. It looks at each of these 6 pillars or 6 areas of focus, and within each of those, there's an additional, diving down or deeper dive into subcomponents within operations. Or within operations, innovation, and all these other sections. So things like process and process flow, workplace organization, performance metrics. So what are we measuring about the process? Continuous improvement. What currently exists within the organization. And similar, subsections with the others. So we sort of consider the operations, innovation, and leadership management to be the core aspects of productivity improvement. Sort of complementary to that are the remaining three here. So customer service and customer focus, project management. So looking at projects as opposed to operations and how similarities and differences. A lot of construction, or a lot of the companies we're dealing with are in sort of construction environments, and construction, lends itself quite well to a project focus, right? Each house construction is in and of itself a project. So what are the aspects of that, phases involved, and best practices associated with that? And that sort of continual learning from each project, and this, taking the best practices as you continue to learn. And then certainly business strategy, as it's related to supporting improvement and the direction of what the business chooses to do from a growth perspective, from a innovation perspective. So within these pillars, the baseline is really a self-assessment, an online questionnaire, basically a number of statements. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's just an assessment of different people within the organization, their perspective, which will then sort of analyze and what are the key insights or takeaways from that. The survey is anonymous. It's more about just getting the answers as opposed to identifying any one particular person. So it's, again, 1 through 5 scale, but it's rather general in terms of it's not an industry specific survey. So there is the option for not applicable if it's something that either isn't really applicable to your segment or your current stage of business evolution. So once the results or surveys are completed, I'll compile the results and really look at it, and certainly share all these results in our typically session 2, looking at it from a number of perspectives. So from the high level view across those 6 dimensions, digging within each subsection, and then at a finest detail, which scores had their highest scoring to assess the organizational strengths, the lowest scoring statements or the opportunities for improvement within the organization. The other thing that is highlighted by this tool is the standard deviation or the variation associated with a particular statement, a particular section. So do people have differing perspectives? And not just, hey, that's neat, but why? And it's a discussion point to sort of understand or dig deeper into that current state assessment. And then, based on or from that assessment piece, then we're sort of, again, customizing the future sessions based on your areas of interest. So this program has some testimonials from previous incarnations of the program, recognizing there's a combination of operations or manufacturing focused companies, some design companies, just again different organizations that we've worked with. I can certainly send out this slide deck if it's something you would want to have this available. We can follow up with additional questions, but there's also time now to sort of jump in and open it up for questions and answers, either about the program or its role or benefit within your company, or again what it might look like or anything, just opening it up.